merciful toward him. Because the sage was a greatly powerful personality, he performed a sacrifice by offering oblations of sweet rice to Twasta. Merciful toward him. Because so earlier on we saw that Vritrasur is also born as the son of Twasta. Twasta had a son called Vishwarup, and when he was killed by Indra, then he performed the Vedic sacrifice and Vritrasur was born. But it's not clear if they are both the same personalities. Right? So it's mentioned Twasta over here, but it could be another Twasta. Now, the thing to note over here is that when Chitraketu talked about the many reasons that he wanted a son, Angira Rishi, he did not point out the obvious, that these are all material attachments, and the nature of material attachment is that they're in duality. There will be happiness and there will be distress. But we see that Angira Muni did not preach about material detachment to Chitraketu, because he knew that instructions at this time would be like sprinkling seeds on a barren soil. Because Chitraketu's heart was so much absorbed in this material desire that it was not fertile for any spiritual instructions. So he still had hopes of happiness from the material world. So the other thing also we see is that a preacher will generally preach at the level of the recipient. So when Krishna was preaching to Arjun, and then when he's explaining the nature of the soul, then what is one of the verses? He says, Nenam Chandati Shastrani, Nenam Davati Pavaka. Right? It cannot be cut to pieces by any weapon, moistened by fire, by water, burned by fire. And so why was he using this analogy of weapons? Because Arjun was a warrior, and Arjun could relate to it. That yes, I have a weapon called the Vayu Astra, I have the Agni Astra, and all of this will not affect the soul. Krishna could have explained it in different ways also, but to Arjun that was the most effective way of explaining. So the expert preacher acts according to the level of the recipient to be most effective. So we see even Krishna does that, right? He preaches at the level of karma, jnana, astang, and bhakti. So why does he preach at the level of karma when he wants everybody to go to bhakti or for jnana and astang, right? So the principle is yatha vidhi. And so yatha vidhi is the act according to the circumstances. When Krishna entered into Dwarka, we see that he reciprocated differently with the different residents of Dwarka. And so he gave his parents, or those who were like his parents, respect. And he treated his wives with a lot of affection, intimacy. Now, if Krishna would start to treat his wife with a lot of respect, or if he would start to chastise the elders as if they were children, then the interactions would not be very pleasing. Right? So yatha vidhi is the principle based on the compassion for the recipient. So preaching is not showing what you know. It is not showing what the other person does not know. But preaching is acting in a way that the other person relates to what you are saying. So sometimes this means being gentle, and sometimes it means being harsh. Right? So when Arjuna was lamenting in the first chapter, Krishna begins the second chapter by saying, right, Klaibyam masma kama partha. Like he said, Kshudram hridaya dorbulyam, right? Where has this weakness of the heart come? This degrading importance, right? So this is the expertise of the preacher, that they will speak according to the level of the recipient. That is exactly what Angira Rishi is doing over here. So it's not that Angira Rishi is not aware of the nature of material happiness. He's more than aware of it, but he's also aware that this will not have any impact on Chitraketu. Right? So he does not even bother speaking about it. Okay, let's go to the next verse. Verse 28. ज्येष्ठ श्रेष्ठ च राजो राज्ञो महिष्णां च भारत नाम्ना कृत्यदुतेस्तस्य यज्ञोचितम् अदाद्विज. O Parishit Maharaj, best of the Bharats, the remnants of the food offered in the yajna were given by the great sage Angira to the first and most perfect among Chitraketu's millions of wives, whose name was Kritadyuti. So Kritadyuti is described as Jeshta Shrestha. So Jeshta means the most senior, and Shrestha means the most perfect. And so she satisfied both the criteria. Because she was the most senior, she had a right to it, and also because she was the most qualified. Verse 29. Athaniptim rajan bhayavitikes tavatmajah harsha shoka pradastubhyam iti brahma suto yayo. Thereafter the great sage told the king, O great king, now you will have a son who will be the cause of both jubilation and lamentation. The sage then left without waiting for Chitraketu's response. So question to you here is that why did the sage leave without waiting for Chitraketu's response?
If Hare Krishna Prabhuji, if he stays, he would ask the cause of his suffering and again remediation, all that thing. Like, he knows that that is something he is expecting. So he gave, and anyway, he don't listen about material detachment, like you are saying in the previous verse. So no point in staying anymore.
Very good. What else?
He knows the future, Prabhu. He knows everything. He knows exactly what will happen. But just like Prabhu just said, he doesn't want to give any explanation.
True. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport, and Vishnu Chakravarti also speaks on it, that Angira was in a dilemma. So he was aware that the son that was born from Angira, from Chitraketu and Kritidyuti would have a very short life, and hence would be a source of great lamentation for the king. So one reason he left quickly was that as a sadhu, he was hesitant to inflict pain on Chitraketu, especially at this time of happiness. Now, generally people are averse to pain, but more so during celebration. Like big celebration is happening and somebody comes and gives you bad news, it actually hurts you a lot more. Right? So that's one reason why he quickly left. He quickly left also because Chitraketu may ask for the specifics on the cause of the joy and sorrow. Now, as a sadhu, he considered it his duty to speak the truth. Because one may say that he didn't have, there was no need for him to say also that the sun will be the cause of sorrow or happiness. But then as a sadhu, he speaks the truth. But then the principle that is given in Manusmriti is Satyam bruyat priyam bruyat, na bruyat satyam apriyam. Priyam cha na ratam bruyat esha dharma sanatana. That one should speak the truth. One should speak what is pleasing. One should not speak the truth if it is unpleasant. One should not speak what is merely pleasing but untrue. So in this verse basically takes two things: telling truth and not telling truth, and pleasing and not pleasing. Right? So there are four combinations that comes. So telling the truth in a pleasing way, yes, tick mark. Right? Then one should not speak the truth, it is unpleasant. Right? So there's the second combination, that truth, unpleasant, do not speak. And then one should not speak that is pleasing but untrue. Right? So third combination, that it is untrue but pleasing, do not speak. And the fourth is obvious, that if it is untrue and not pleasing, then there's no need for you to, they don't even consider it. So this situation comes in the category of one should not speak the truth if it is unpleasant. Right? So Angira speaks a version of the truth. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti expands upon this, saying that if Angira was concerned about the impact of this on Chitraketu, he could have not spoken, but yet he spoke and left, because Angira knew that Chitraketu would process this in a different way. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says the sage solves the dilemma by speaking in general terms. He calls the child a source of happiness and sorrow. Now, every child is a source of happiness and sorrow in general terms. So Chitraketu would think that because my child will be very qualified, he will be a source of happiness. But as a youth, he will be rebellious. As a child, he will be naughty, difficult to control, so he will be a source of concern. As a doting father, he looks upon both as desirable qualities. Right? Sometimes you see parents think that, oh, my child, so much of trouble he gave me, and he was so naughty, this, that, but then he was also very good in his studies and he did very well there, etc. So both of them they consider as palatable. Now Vishwanath Chakravarti says that Chitraketu may also think that my son will have so many good qualities that he will actually become more famous than me. That may be the cause of my sorrow. That is the nature of the material world, that even a father experiences envy towards the son. So when he did not have a son, he was in sorrow. And when he has a son, he thinks that he may be in sorrow because the son might eclipse him in terms of name and fame. So, but when Angira Rishi said that, he said that knowing that Chitraketu will think along those lines. He will not think that my son will be a cause of my sorrow because he will die. That thought will not come in the mind. So Angira Rishi expertly protecting himself also. That Chitraketu might later on chastise or be resentful to Angira Muni, that you could have at least told me. You could have indicated to me that my child would have a short life. But you did not, so you cheated me. So Angira Rishi is protecting himself from that scenario also. Prabhupada in the purport says that in Bengal, there is a proverb that says that having no maternal uncle, it is better to have a maternal uncle who is blind. Mama na thakartheka and the mama balu. Right. So the assumption is that having a maternal uncle is a good thing. And if one does not have a maternal uncle, then at least one can have a maternal uncle who is handicapped. So better to have something than nothing. So the king accepted this philosophy, thinking that a disobedient son would be better than no son at all. And Prabhupada quotes Chanakya Pandit that, what is the use of a son who is neither a learned scholar nor a devotee? Such a son is like a blind diseased eye which is always causing suffering. Nevertheless, the material world is so polluted that one wants to have a son even though he is useless. This attitude was represented in the history of King Chitraketu. Right. So when Vidur came to Hastinapur, well, this is more from the perspective of Satyam Bruham, Priyam Bruham, right? So when Vidur came to Hastinapur, he spoke of everything but the disappearance of Krishna. Because there was a lot of happiness and joy in everyone in seeing Vidur. They talked about all his travels, but he left out the part of the disappearance of Krishna. And the second reason was that he wanted to preach to Dhritarashtra also. Okay, let's move on to the next verse. Verse 30. Sapi tad prashana deva chitraketu adharayat garbham krityutir devi kritikagneerivatmajam. As Kritika Devi, after receiving the semen of Lord Shiva from Agni, conceived a child named Skanda, Kartike, Kritadyuti, having received the semen from Chitraketu, became pregnant after eating remnants of food from the yajna performed by Angira. So the first part is a pastime of the appearance of Lord Skanda, also known as Kartik, who is the firstborn son of Lord Shiva and Parvati Devi. So here it is mentioned that the Kritika Devi received the semen from Agni. So there's a bit of a pastime over here that when the Devas, they were repeatedly defeated by the Asuras, and especially there was a demon known as Tarakasur who was constantly beating them up. So they went to Lord Brahma, and Brahma said, you need to have a strong Senapati, commander in chief. And they said, who's qualified? And Brahma said that only a son born from Lord Shiv can become a qualified commander in chief and kill Tarakasur. Now Lord Shiva at that time, even though he was married to Parvati Devi, he was in deep austerities. Right? He was not inclined to any material union. So at that time, then we see it's a very long past. The Kamdev, he hid on the side and he started shooting arrows of love towards Lord Shiv so that he may unite with Parvati. Parvati was, so when Sati died, she took birth as a daughter of Himvan, the personification of Himalaya. Right. So when Kamdev started shooting his arrows at Shiva, Lord Shiva got angry, and then he opened his third eye in anger and reduced Kamdev to ashes. And later Kamdev would regain the form by the benediction of Parvati Devi. So hence he is also known as Ananga, the one without a body. So Lord Shiva then he later on he marries Parvati Devi, but then he goes back to his austerities. So then the Devas pray to Lord Shiva for a child that could lead them under the Asuras, right? So then Lord Shiva, in preparation for having a qualified child, and this we see again that the Grastas, they treat the process of procreation also with as if it's an act of devotion. So Lord Shiva, he started performing. He went into deep yoga to empower his virya, his semen, and the semen became so powerful that it was essentially burning the whole universe. So then the Devas prayed to Lord Shiva that if this happens, then you'll just burn everything, right? So then the semen was given to Agni because they thought that Agni, with its own heat, can carry the heat of the semen. So Agni and Vayu along with Agni, took the semen away, but even they could not bear the heat of it. So at last, they placed the semen in the waters of Ganga. And then from the waters of Ganga, it reached Lake Sharvan. So from there, the semen fructified and a child was born. So then the question came that who would nurse the child? So then the six Kritika stars, they took this service. So that's why they became his nursing mothers. And because there were six of them, the child was looking at all six of them. Kartik is known as Shanmukha, that is six-faced. And is also known as Subramanya. Subramanya means one who leads auspiciously. And then later on, when Skanda grew a little older, the Devas made him the commander-in-chief, and Parvati gave him a Shakti spear. And then he, of course, went and defeated the Asuras and killed Tarka, Tarka Asur. So the pastime we mentioned here as an example, there's a lot of difference between the two, but just it's given just that just like Krita Devi received the semen of Lord Shiva from Agni, right? So the wife of Chitraketu received his semen, which was empowered by and she was empowered by eating the remnants of the yajna. Verse 31. Tasyano dinam garbha shuklapaksha ivodupa vavrate shurashen sha tejasa sanake nripa. After receiving semen from Maharaj Chitraketu, the king of Shurasen, Queen Kritadyuti gradually developed in a pregnancy. O King Parikshit, just as the moon develops during the bright fortnight. Shukla Paksha. Next verse. Atakal upavrate kumara samajayata janayan shura shenanam shanvatam paramamudam. Thereafter, in due course of time, a son was born to the king. Hearing the news of this, all the inhabitants of the state of Shurasen were extremely pleased. Verse 33. Hishto Rajkumarasya Snata Suchir Alankrataha Vachayet Vashisho Vipra Karayama Shajatakam. King Chitraketu was especially pleased. After purifying himself by bathing and by decorating himself with ornaments, he engaged learned Brahmins in offering benedictions to the child and performing the birth ceremony. Tebhyo hrinayam rajatam vasamsya avarnani cha gramam hayan gajan pradat denu nama brudanishat. Unto the Brahmins who took part in the ritualistic ceremony, the king gave charity of gold, silver, garments, ornaments, villages, horses, and elephants, as well as 60 crores of cows, 600 million cows. Vavrishkam manesham prajanyaiva dehinam dhanyam yasyasam ayusham kumarasya mahamanaha. As a cloud indiscriminately pours water on the earth, the beneficent king Chitraketu, to increase the reputation, opulence, and longevity of his son, distributed like rainfall all desirable things to everyone. कृच्छ्रलब्धताराजशे तनया नूदिनं पितुः यथा निःस्वस्य कृच्छ्राप्ते धने स्नेहो न वर्धतो. When a poor man gets some money after great difficulty, his affection for the money increases daily. Similarly, when Chitraketu, after great difficulty, received a son, his affection for the son increased day after day. Matastvavatitaram putra snehamoh samudbhava kritayude sapatninam prajakama jaro bhava. The mother's attraction and attention to the son, like that of the child's father, excessively increased. The other wives, seeing Kritadetu's son, were very much agitated, as if by high fevers, with a desire to have sons. So the nature of sorrow is that it is magnified by envy. Now, previously, all the wives of Chitraketu were united in sorrow. And so they were all empathizing with one another. They were very affectionate to one another. But now there is a division. So Kritadyuti was always Jeshta and Shrestha. Right? But because of that, there was no envy. And they accepted her position, and they, just like Kritadyuti was without a child, they were without a child. So they were united in that predicament. But now Kritadyuti is blissful as a mother, and the other co-wives are not. So it is said that the most difficult thing is to experience the joy and the happiness of others. It is easier to feel sorrow in the grief of others. Right? Now, again, that is difficult. So generally, feeling the pain of others is empathy. And even empathy is it's a rare feeling. But empathy is more common than this feeling of having genuine joy at the happiness of others. Somebody comes to you and tells you, I won the lottery. Right? Now you might externally be, or 99% be happy. Good for you. But there's 1% of you that will think, oh my God, this guy is going to be so rich and I'll continue to be poor. Right? So the reason behind this is that the constitutional position of the soul is happiness. And it is always hankering to attain that constitutional position. However, the soul does not know grief and sorrow. So that is a material imposition. So constitutionally, the hankering for bliss is much, much stronger than aversion against grief. Because in the material world, grief is always there. So one reason they call it the conditioned soul is conditioned by grief. One way or the other, there is grief. Happiness is rare. But happiness is the constitutional position of the soul. So what does it mean? That for the soul, happiness is the attraction to happiness is much more than the aversion to grief. Now, when you put that in a material situation, the happiness of the others becomes a greater source of agitation than the grief of others. Right? Because the soul is used to bliss but not sorrow. So that's why it is difficult to feel genuine happiness for the happiness of others, because that is what the soul is actually hankering for. When the soul sees the grief in others, then it's a foreign situation for the soul, right? So it's not going to obviously desire that grief. It's not going to feel happiness for that grief. So relatively easier to empathize. So we see that manifesting in the wives of Maharaj Chitraketu. Verse 38. Chitraketu rata priti yathadare prajavati na tathanyasho sanjane balam lalyato navaham. As King Chitraketu fostered his son very carefully, his affection for Queen Kritidyuti increased, but gradually he lost affection for the other wives who had no sons. So now the stage is being set for the inevitable conclusion. So firstly, the wives were envious of the happiness of Kritadetu because she had a son. Now they will be envious of the affection of Maharaj Chitraketu towards Kritadyuti. So as wives, they had two things that they hanker for. One is the affection of the husband, and the second is being a mother. And both of that they had lost to Kritadyuti. Kritadyuti became a mother, and she also became the exclusive object of the affection of the husband. So initially, it is said that a man is attached to his wife because of her qualities. Later on, the attachment of a husband to the wife is based on the progeny. Or conversely, the attachment for the progeny is based on the relationship with the wife. So we see in the case of King Utanpad, because he was more attached to Suruchi than Sunati, he was more attached to Uttama than Dhruv. When King Darshan received the payasam, he distributed it amongst his three wives to make sure that there was no envy between them. But because he was more attached to Lord Ram than the others, he became more attentive to Kaushalya. Then KK became envious, right? And then the whole intrigue unfolded, right? So Chitraketu was actively complicit in what will happen. So later on, we'll see that yes, the wives were wrong in poisoning the son, but Chitraketu was wrong because of his behaving in this way. Just like Dashrath was in a way complicit because he was openly attached to Lord Ram. Now in Dashrath's case, it's a little different because his object of attraction happened to be the personality of Godhead. So nobody can fault one for being attracted to the personality of Godhead. But even in that case, this partiality towards one son and then the son's mother, it created all this intrigue. Same thing we are seeing in the case of Chitraketu. Verse 39. Taha parayita. It's a different meaning. Taha parayata payanatmanam garyantayo Bhaya suyaya anapattena dukena ragascha nadarena cha. The other queens were extremely unhappy due to being sonless. Because the king's negligence towards them, they condemned themselves an enemy and lamented. Right? So we see these two things stirring the anger and envy and sorrow in the queens. One, they were childless. And second, they were being neglected by the king. All this was magnified by the fact that there was somebody, one amongst them, who was in the opposite situation. Pratidyuti had a son and was the object of affection of the husband. And so, whatever sorrow that they were experiencing because of being childless and because of being neglected by the husband, it became magnified millions of times when they looked at Kritadevi. So the cause of the death of the son is not just the wives, but also the actions of Chitraketu. He became bewildered by the happiness, and the co-wives became bewildered by sorrow. So that is the nature of material duality. Both happiness and sorrow, they result in bewilderment, and ultimately they both result in lamentation. Verse 40. Diggaprajam striyam papam pratyuschagra samaktama suprajabirsh sapatnibir dasyamiva tirakshatam. A wife who has no sons is neglected at home by her husband and dishonored by her co-wives, exactly like a maidservant. Certainly, such a woman is condemned in every respect because of her sinful life. So this verse is spoken by the co-wives, and it summarizes the state of their mind. So they give three reasons for their grief. So they say, aprajam, no sons. Then they say, pratyugraha samatam, that dishonored by husband. And second and third is dishonored by co-wife who has a son. So Saptanibi, so Saptanibi is Kritadyuti, and Prajabi. Su Prajabi is that they have a son. She has a son. They are aprajam, without a son. So in their mind, they are thinking that dasim tiraskatam, that Kritadyuti and Chitraketu are treating us as dasim tiraskatam. Tiraskatam means that being insulted, like dasis. Now, at this point, they are in a more philosophical frame of mind. So they say that the cause of these three things contributing to our grief is papam, that they are our own sins. So this is the proper Vedic understanding. Right? The nature of the grief is that it forces one to look externally. Right? So in workplace, sometimes they would have this funny meme that if something goes wrong, there's like a flow chart. Something goes wrong, step one, find somebody to blame. Right? And if you can find somebody to blame, if not, then you try to hide the problem. Just like a funny flow chart there, but there is some gravity in that. That the nature of grief is that you always look externally. If this is the cause of my unhappiness, this is the cause of unhappiness. So what we will see that in the wife's mind, while they're beginning from a philosophical platform, because they're so much consumed by grief, they will start looking externally. And where will the focus of the grief be? In the son. who is the most faultless. Right? But that is that is the process of one resolving one's uh, uh, state of unhappiness. That because this was a different time, in the present day and time, nobody will go the first step. And they will not say it is because of my sins. But because this was a different time, they're actually beginning in the right platform. That we must have performed some sins. That is why Aprachatam. That is why we are dishonored by Chitraketu. That is why we are being dishonored by Krityadyuti. But the cause of this is that we had performed some sins. So Prabhupada in the purport says that Chanakya Pandit says that a person who has no mother at home and whose wife does not speak sweetly should go to the forest. For such a person, living in the home and living in the forest are equal. And then he kind of compares it with wife, that if a woman does not have a son and is not cared by the husband and is neglected by the co-wives, better for her to go to the forest than to remain at home. But of course, they will not go to the forest. Verse 41. Dasinam kono santapa swamina paricharyaya abhikshanam labdamananam dasya dasiva durbhaga. Even maid servants who are constantly engaged in rendering service to the husband are honored by the husband, and thus they have nothing for which to lament. Our position, however, is that we are maid servants of the maid servant. Therefore, we are most unfortunate. So when they are thinking like this, we can understand that their mentality is becoming more and more material. In the spiritual context, this is a glorious position. Das anudas anudas, being the servant of the servant of the servant. Right? But the wives of Chitraketu are saying das, dasya dasivi durbhaga. That this is our greatest misfortune, that we are servant of the servant. Now, the difference is that the maid servant get credit for their work. So even though their primary engagement is that of service, since it is rendered directly to the master, they're noticed. Right? So the this is a little bit of an aside. The why in the spiritual context this das anudas is always being glorified, because when you are serving the master directly, then the master will appreciate your service directly. You cook good food, give it to the master says good food. So there is that satisfaction of being recognized. However, if you're serving the servants, then the master is not even aware of your service. Right? So let's assume in the kitchen there are cooks who are cooking, and there is somebody who puts everything on a plate and comes and serves it on the table, and person eats it and tells to the person, good food. As far as he is concerned, the person who is serving did a good job. The person may not even be aware that there are 4 people in the kitchen who worked hard to make that food. So for them, they don't even get the satisfaction of seeing the master pleased by their service. So materially, it is considered to be a more fallen position, because there is no glorification. Spiritually, it is a more advanced position, because one only then serves because of a desire to serve, not because there is a desire to receive credit for the work. That is why in a spiritual context, Dasanudas is glorified. Verse 42. Evam sandayamananam saptanya putra sampada ragyo samatavathinam Vidvesho Balavan Abhut. Sri Sukdev Goswami continued, being neglected by their husband and seeing Kritadyuti's opulence in possessing a son, Kritadyuti's co-wives always burned in envy, which became extremely strong. Right? So, summary of what was said so far, that neglected by their husband and the seeing the opulence of Kritadyuti, right? So, what was initially shade sorrow became envy, and that envy became even more intense when Chitraketu began to shower his affection on Kritadyuti, when they saw Kritadyuti's opulence at possessing a son, when they saw how in their mind Kritadyuti was treating them as maidservants. So non-enviousness is the quality of a devotee, and enviousness is the quality of a non-devotee. Because being a non-devotee is rooted in the platform of envy, the original envy, the envy towards Krishna. So, interestingly, this is not given by the co-wives, since envy is so intrinsic that a person who possesses it cannot see it. Right? Rather, they see its symptoms and attributes it to the cause. Right? So they are seeing things that are happening around them. They're seeing Kritadyuti happy. They're seeing Chitraketu neglecting them. Chitraketu being attentive to Kritadyuti. They're seeing Kritadyuti apparently minimizing them, right? But they are never able to see their own envy. So it's kind of like the eye being able to see itself. Like the eye can see so much in the world, but it can never see itself. Because all that they were seeing, they were actually seeing through the eye of envy. And that is why they were never able to, they never sat down and said that maybe all this that we are seeing and we are experiencing is because of envy. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is noted that very first canto, first chapter, Nirmat Saranam Satam, that the scripture is meant for Nirmat Saranam. Like Matsara, Matsarya means envy. Nirmat Saranam is the non-envious one. Same point is made at the end of the Bhagavatam. In the 12th canto, 13th chapter, it is said that anyone who seriously tries to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, who properly hears it and chants it with devotion, becomes quickly liberated. So, why is non-enviousness considered to be a condition to read the Bhagavatam? Because the Bhagavatam is a glorification of Krishna. So, if one has enviousness of Krishna, one will never be able to appreciate the lessons of the Bhagavatam. So, summary of the reasons of the distress of the co-wives. So 6 reasons are given. One is that aprajam, that they did not have any sons. Second is pratyugraha samatama, that they were dishonored by Chitraketu. Third is shaptanabhishu prajabi dashim tirskritam, that they felt they were dishonored by Kritadyuti. Fourth is they considered the position to be maidservant of the maidservant. Fifth is that they considered that they were being burned by their past sins. And the sixth is that seeing the opulence of Kritadyuti in possessing a son. Right? So this is spoken by Sukadeva Goswami on behalf of the wives. The wives don't speak it, but so Sukadeva Goswami, he says that this was also burning. Okay, verse 43. See how we're doing with time. Okay, maybe we should pause because it's the end of a section, and well, I think there is one more verse, and then that's the end of the section. So we'll do verse 43. Vidveshanashtamatya striyo darun chetasha garam dadu kumaraya durmarshan patim prati. As their envy increased, they lost their intelligence. Being extremely hard-hearted and unable to tolerate the king's neglect, they finally administered poison to the son. Right? So this is the Vidvesha Nashta Matya. So Vidvesha Nashta Matya, that the envy destroyed their mind. And what did they do? They Darun Cheshta, that they poisoned the child. So the nature of envy is that it is unreasonable. So in the 6 reasons that we saw over there, none of them were pointing at the child. The child was not doing anything to them. It was just a child. Right? They were upset at Chitraketu. They were upset at Krityadyuti. They were upset at destiny, upset at their own sin. None of them was that they were upset at the child. But where does it result in? They kill the child. Right? That is the nature of envy, that it is completely unreasonable. Second nature of the envy is that it is very pervasive. So Maharaj Chitraketu had 1 crore wives. Right? And take away Krityadyuti, one less than 1 crore, they all developed the same mentality. Kill the child. You would expect at some point they had like a meeting to what to do, and all of them agreed. Not one of them said, "What has the son done to us? Maybe we should kill Krityadyuti. If we kill Krityadyuti, then we will become the foster mothers. Maybe we will kill Chitraketu because he is neglecting us. He gave the yagya prasad to Krityadyuti, not to us." Right? But nobody said that. That's the nature of envy. That it falls to the lowest common denominator. So in the Mahabharata Shanti Parva, it is said, Strinam hi visham ayudham. Right? So the weapon of women is poison. So Strinam hi visham ayudham. So when they go to battle, men go to battle with weapons, and women go to battle with poison. A poison, in this case, is actual poison. Could also be poisoning the mind, poisoning by using words. So there's a similar pastime of King Sagar that will appear later in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam. So his father was King Bahu in the Ikshvaku Vamsha. So when Bahu was defeated, he retired to the forest with his eldest wife, whose name was Yadavi, and co-wives. And there Bahu, he ultimately passed away. However, at the time of his death, his eldest wife, Yadavi, was pregnant. And the co-wives were so envious. Now the husband is also dead. There is no kingdom. But even then the co-wives were so envious that they poisoned Yadavi. They're better for her to die and the child in her womb to die. And of course, then it happened because of the potency of the child. The child remained in the womb for 7 years, digesting the poison. And then Sage Orva, he took pity on this on this Queen Yadavi. He took her to the shelter and um, um, he personally delivered the child. And the child was a great personality known as Sagar. So the word Sagar means one who is born with poison. And then we know that King Sagar has this great lineage in which Bhagirathi appears later on, who brings Ganga to the earth. Okay, so we'll stop over here. Next time we will complete so there are about 15 verses left. We should complete the chapter and hopefully start the next chapter. Any comments, observations, questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for the class, Prabhu. Today's class, very deep topic is touched, that is envy. With the examples and, we can see how unreasonable it is. Like sometimes we do have that. So, uh, I don't know what to say, but at very deep lessons, I just want to thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. And yes, I think that's the beauty of Bhagavatam, that every pastime, there are so many currents that are flowing, superficial, subdermal, deep. And as I was mentioning, the acharyas, they take great pleasure in churning them for our education, for our inspiration. Okay, so we'll end over here. Yes, Prabhu?
Yeah, no, I just want to mention also this can be also applied not only in a family, wife, co-wife, or husband. It can also be applicable into a business, into a temple, into management of a temple, management of a corporation, or among friends. I think this lesson can be applicable to many things, like favoring people and creating anonymity in other people's heart that can create more problem later.
Yeah. The nature of envy is that it drives the material world, and it is difficult to contain. And even when you're trying to stay away from the material world, but when I said you still have one foot in the material world, that foot is also absorbing the envy from there and getting it into the spiritual endeavors.
And Prabhuji, if somebody gets inflicted with the envy, because other emotions are like kind of controllable, is something very difficult to control. How one should act to come out of that?
By serving the object of the envy.
Okay.
By doing the opposite. So even though service is external and envy is internal, but the nature of service is that it is so strong that it would eradicate that. So the examples are given that if you're envious towards one, then one can start by glorifying the person. So just serving by words. If you cannot glorify, at least by mind, you can think such a nice person and good qualities. Or you can serve the person, invite for prasadam, seek, can I help you in a way. So just like it said that when a person is possessed by a ghost, then you can't expel the ghost because the ghost has taken over you, but you can recite the mantras to expel the ghost. So if one is possessed by envy, you can't just say that from tomorrow I'll become unenvious, right? Because envy is most of the time you won't even realize you're possessed with envy. But if you're seeing the symptoms, then you can mitigate them by the opposite. Like it is said, just like envy is the fabric of the material world, service is the fabric of the spiritual world. Everybody is trying to serve everybody else.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll end the video. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anand Kori Vaishnavinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Thai Gaur Premanand ki jai. Hare Krishna.